It was a distinguished group of lawyers that orchestrated the discreet fundraiser in Washington in mid-November. Vernon E. Jordan Jr., the counselor to Democratic presidents, and Eric H. Holder Jr., the former Attorney General, were listed as hosts on the invitation. Over an assortment of Mexican dishes, in a home not far from the National Cathedral, Senators Kamala Harris of California and Catherine Cortez Masto of Nevada, both former prosecutors, enthused about the prospect of electing another Democrat to the Senate. Beaming in from Alabama to thank his new donors seated beside his wife, Louise, on a halting video stream was Doug Jones. For M.R. Jones, the Democratic nominee in a special election for the Senate, the event confirmed his dizzying emergence in national politics. Days earlier, his Republican opponent, Roy S. Moore, had been hit with allegations of child sex abuse that threatened to upend his campaign and give M.R. Jones an unexpected shot at victory. From the outside, M.R. Jones had the look of an accidental contender, someone whose campaign was lifted to prominence by M.R. Moore's problems, like a man who plays the lottery on impulse and wins a record jackpot. But far from a local ingenue thriving on pure luck, M.R. Jones, his friends and colleagues say, spent years preparing to make a leap into elective office, building a web of relationships beyond his deep red state that helped sustain a seemingly long-shot candidacy through its lean early months. A former United States Attorney, M.R. Jones, 63, has relied most heavily on a community of liberal lawyers and veteran prosecutors who have vouched for him in Washington. Among M.R. Jones's champions have been M.R. Holder, who served with M.R. Jones as a federal prosecutor, and Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, the former vice presidential candidate whom M.R. Jones befriended more than a decade ago. More than a dozen former United States attorneys cut checks to M.R. Jones's campaign by the end of September, from states across the South as well as California, Massachusetts, Michigan, and New York. M.R. Kaine contributed $5,000, the maximum amount allowed from his Political Action Committee in May, 3 months before any other Democratic senator gave him a donation. Even before M.R. Moore faced a debilitating scandal, M.R. Jones established a clear financial advantage. He finished September with about $1 million in the bank, nearly double M.R. Moore's modest war chest, and that disparity has likely grown. In many cases, M.R. Jones's allies described backing him as an act of friendship rather than strategy, given Alabama's forbidding political hue. M.R. Jones began calling them early this year to argue that he could actually win, meeting a combination of encouragement and skepticism. At a reunion dinner of Clinton-appointed prosecutors in October, M.R. Jones checked in with his former colleagues via FaceTime. Paul Coggins, a Dallas-based lawyer who was the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Texas, said M.R. Jones reached out to him, laying out his strategy, before announcing for the race. M.R.